Today on Uncommon Knowledge, Charles Darwin and God.
Funding for this program is provided by the John M. Olin Foundation and the Star Foundation.
Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. Our show today, Darwin and God, the interplay of natural science and religion. Did life on Earth just happen by accident, or did somebody with a capital S, make it happen? According to Charles Darwin and the theory of evolution, the former. According to the Judeo-Christian view of the world, the latter. Science and religion at odds. Or are they? Joining us today, three guests. Genie Scott is director of the National Center for Science Education. Robert Russell is director of the Center for Theology and Natural Science. William Dembski is a fellow at the Discovery Institute and the author of Mere Creation: Science, Faith, and Intelligent Design. George Gaylord Simpson, author of The Meaning of Evolution, quote, "Man is the result of a purposeless and natural process that did not have him in mind," close quote. True or false? Bill?
There's no way he could know that.
There's no way he could know that. Bob?
From the point of view of science, true. From the point of theology, false.
Oh, you're engaging us in contradictory truths. True
No.
and false?
No. There's the truth that can include a truth. My bathroom scales can't tell me what I'm thinking. It doesn't say I'm not thinking.
Ah, okay. Jeannie, true or false?
I don't think you can make that statement from wearing your scientist hat.
The scientist has no way of apprehending that, whether that's true or not.
Well,
if
as a
he's being strictly
scientist, I mean, it happens to be my personal philosophical point of view, but
Right.
I can't say that it's a research finding.
Okay.
That's my point.
Okay, so we have all batted away George Gaylord Simpson. Now we'll go on to Charles Darwin. Harder case altogether. So what does Darwin's theory of evolution imply about our understanding of the world we live in particular about religious belief? Let me give you another quotation to respond to. The journalist Tom Bethel, quote, "If evolution is true, and all creatures great and small are here on Earth as the result of a long chain of improbable accidents, then we have little reason to believe that God exists or that life has any meaning whatsoever. I would put it as starkly as that," close quote. A belief in evolution almost not almost, he says necessarily militates toward agnosticism, atheism. Bob?
It's patently false. For 110 years, we've had profound Christian theologians, scholars, pastors who've appropriated evolution and said, this is how God creates. What a gift.
Jeannie?
It's empirically false. There are too many people scientists and others who accept evolution, who find meaning in life and don't feel like Tom Bethel does, that you have to throw everything out just because there's contingency in the history of life.
So you wouldn't say that there's been a long erosion, Matthew Arnold's great poem about the sound of the tide rushing out, the tide of faith rushing out, and that we live in the modern world, skepticism toward the existence of God has achieved a standing that it never had before Darwin.
No. First of all, you could attack Copernicus as much as Darwin if you want to. Second of all, skepticism and
Wait, you better make that point a little more fully.
Well, Copernicus dethroned humanity in a certain sense from being the center of the universe to being peripheral. So you could say that's around for atheism right there, as serious as Darwinism. But the real issue is that the concern that I would have for this quote is that we shouldn't place the basis for our foundations for our faith in science, but in fact in religious tradition.
Okay, Bill, is there a necessary connection between evolution and a kind of
No, I mean, when you say necessary, I mean, that's sort of logical.
That's the wrong way to put it.
Let me play a little bit of the devil's advocate. Richard Dawkins, in his book, The Blind Watchmaker, says that Darwin made it possible to become an intellectually fulfilled atheist. And I think there's a sense in which sociologically, I mean, there's been a drive from Darwinism to atheism. But is there a necessary connection? Can you somehow bring them into consonance, Darwinian view and a Christian view? Ken Miller on the recent PBS Evolution program describes himself as an orthodox Darwinian and an orthodox Christian. And I think it's possible to make that sort of rapprochement.
But see, it's much more than possible. Look at John Paul II says Evolution is the way God creates, so does
Oh,
Teilhard de Chardin.
excuse me.
So
He
does
certainly has
Ian
not
Barber.
said evolution is the way God
Well, it's
creates.
close to it.
The line is that evolution, the quotation from his
Yes,
1996
which I translated
statement,
into my book.
to which we'll get, by
Yes,
the way,
good. I wish you
is
would.
that evolution is more than a hypothesis.
That's right.
That's a pretty weak statement.
And then he goes on to say...
He didn't say that's the way God creates.
And he goes on to say that we can appropriate this for Christian revelation.
Okay.
Our guests agree that God and Charles Darwin could get along just fine. But what kind of God?
Let me quote the journalist Frederick Cruz. What kind of God is consistent with evolutionary theory? Theistic evolutionism would seem to demote the shaper of the universe to a deus absconditus, lovely phrase, who long ago set some processes in motion and then withdrew from the scene. A God who absconded?
No.
No.
God is immanent through the process of nature. Everything in nature is God acting. So God is highly immanent as well as transcendent to evolution. The problem for a design argument is it makes God into a sort of onerous God because God creates suffering and pain in evolution.
Now, wait a minute. So how does evolution solve that problem?
From a theistic point of view, God allows the world to create itself. So there's freedom built into the process of the world, and that ultimately gives us our freedom to be who we are and to come into community of love.
Now, Aquinas teaches that God actually holds everything in being from moment to moment to moment. He affirms the existence of each one of us and indeed every living object from moment to moment to moment. Now, how is it that he can be so intimately involved with each of us and yet be perfectly happy to let me evolve a second head or something like that? Square those two for me, the sense of distance and intimacy at the same time.
Well, you need distance and intimacy to come into a free communion. Otherwise, we'd be puppets of God. God would force us into a relationship, and that's never what we want. You want enough distance so we're free, genuine agents to achieve our own life, but at the same time to choose to come into relation with the source of being. Yes, Aquinas did say what you said. Aquinas said that God is the creator ex nihilo. All that is exists because of God at all time. God also creates the laws of nature, including evolutionary laws, natural selection, and variation. God created the laws of physics. So all those are God's creation, and God acts through them because God is immanent to the processes of the world.
Okay, and you, although you're a skeptic, I assume from what you said earlier, but that sounds fine to you. That doesn't give you any, it sounds coherent, it's consistent with what you understand of evolution. Go ahead.
Your original question was, what kind of God, reading Tom Bethel's quote. There are some views of God that absolutely are incompatible with evolution. That's certainly the case. The view of sort of your basic Sistine Chapel guy who's pointing down and creating everything in its present form, which is what a literalist view of the Bible would say, that God is incompatible with evolution. But the important thing to remember in this controversy is that that's not the only conception of God. Evolution is as it is, and it has ramifications for theological and philosophical views, both humanist as well as theist. But we can't change the science because we don't like the theological implications, which is the problem that we've had with the creation science movement. And what I worry a little bit with some of the intelligent design manifestations.
And I agree with that.
Now we return here to Dr. Dembski, who has written a book entitled, I'll fumble over the title, Intelligent Design, the Bridge between, finish the title for me.
Theology.
The bridge between science and theology.
Right.
He just provided a bridge. Why do we need intelligent design?
I'm not sure that what I'm saying there is really inconsistent with what Bob was saying. I mean, I think we might quibble over the nature of divine action, but certainly I'd want to assign an autonomy to the creation so that natural processes do operate. And I would say not everything is designed, and there's room for design acting in conjunction with natural processes. So it's not the, I think there's a sense often that design commits you sort of to determinism. It's like the architect. You've got the blueprint and you're going to just build that thing according to spec, and if it's off at all, then and since God's a perfect builder, He's going to get it down to spec, and that's not the sort of conception that I'm wedded to.
We have now achieved a state that a television host hates, which is complete agreement.
No,
so I'm now
I'm
now attempting to show a little. I'm now going to attempt the show to force it to evolve.
Let me help
will
you?
you?
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
I want to press Bill on this point. That is the agent that's designing, either it's natural or divine. If it's natural, why is it interested in theology? The Martians did it. And if it's divine, what a terrible result that God inflicts pain, suffering, disease, death, wasps that put their
Why you ingrate? He's putting up with your view.
That's right.
Now, but you're turning to attack him.
Hey, don't
so how do you,
I'm raising a critical question of him,
This is where
Peter.
the question of divine action and the nature of nature, the nature of creation comes in. Because I think what Bob is going to be committed to is not a classical theism, but sort of what's called a panentheism, where God is in some ways constrained by the natural forces, and that gives God a distance, and so God does not have to take responsibility for the ichneumonidae, wasps, or all these nasty little things that are out there. I think you're going to have problems one way or the other. A God who is not, who is constrained by natural forces, I think doesn't give you really a classical doctrine of creation.
Yeah, I don't see that.
On to a subject that's traditionally considered in the realm of religion, morality. How does Darwinism account for it?
What is morality? What is our sense of right and wrong? That is one more adaptive mechanism?
You asked the right person, because my background is in anthropology. And as we look at human societies across the planet, in time and through time, we find that there are a lot of different conceptions of morality. So it does not look as if morality is something that is divinely inspired. Either that or the divine is inspiring different human societies in different ways.
Oh, but that's precisely the tradition Judeo-Christian belief. That the tradition, God hands Moses the tablets, the Ten Commandments are something new in history. That's why they're so distinctive. That's why the Jews are the chosen people. Nobody would deny for a moment.
And he tells the Munduruku and the Brazilian rainforest that they should really go out and cut off each other's heads.
Okay, so give me a definition or a way of understanding morality from an evolutionary point of view.
From a scientific point of view, from an evolutionary point of view,
Right.
you can look at morality as having adaptive function. The major reason would be us, them, so to speak. You behave morally to people who are us. Your family, your kin group. Remember, we're not talking about urban 20th century
Right.
industrialist populations. We're talking about tribal groups and
Systems of belief that arose when we were all
and simpler
Transkin altruism.
Speak up, my man.
How do you explain
wait, let me-
transkin altruism?
Being nice to people, altruistic toward people
Don't
who are
have your-
not part of your kin group.
because there are. I hadn't finished with my us's.
Go ahead.
The us's would first of all include your family, then your kin group, then the tribe that you live in, which generally would tend to share more genes with you than other people in general. And you have decreasing responsibility to people who are more and more distant from you. And we tend to find this even in industrialism.
You have created an opening. Do you mind if I move
That's
in on
the
him?
purpose for the commandment that all people are created equal, because that allows you to identify transkin to be all of humanity.
Hang on just a moment
The
now.
function of
You've
religion.
got, does the theory of evolution chip away at traditional morality?
When you read Michael Ruse and E.O. Wilson, I mean, their take on Genie Scott's story is that morality is an illusion fobbed off on us by our genes. So, you know, so I think that is a natural reading of it.
Now, you
Unless
have to
bring
draw
in
out your
some
sword at that
theology.
point, don't you?
But Francisco Ayala is wonderful here. He says against Ruse.
Who's he?
Professor of genetics at UC Irvine.
All right.
Ayala, world-class scientist, will say evolution bequeaths us the capacity for morality, but not the contents. The contents is a free variable chosen by people in social groups. So I have the capacity
You just
for
described an
morality.
entire process that leaves out God. It leaves out
not at all.
objective right
Not-
and wrong.
No, not at all.
No?
No, because science can't see God in the first place. Science describes the capacity to receive God's revelation of the content of morality for which evolution gives us the capacity.
You feel comfortable with that?
This sort of form-content distinction, I think it's sometimes hard to draw that distinction very.
It's Ayala's point, though.
Yeah, well, but it's, I mean, but,
Okay.
you know, being nice to people, I mean, doing things that are going to help or hurt them, it seems to me that these will be universals, and that I just don't see how you can draw those
Universals,
distinctions.
but they're differential. I mean, we're much more likely to send money to people in Florida who've had a hurricane than we are to send people in Bangladesh who've had a hurricane. I mean, because we're more similar to people in Florida, even in modern industrial societies.
Peter, the crucial point emerged around classical theism. By the way, I'm a classical theist too. But the crucial question emerged around the question of design. Is a designer a natural agent like the Martians? In which case, how do you make intelligible that they're acting everywhere throughout evolution? Or is the designer God? In which case, how could God get it so wrong?
what you're going to have to factor in within a traditional framework is some sort of doctrine of the fall, that this creation is not what it was intended to be.
But how do you do that?
And that natural causes also have operated, and that their effect often is to degenerate designs.
Yeah,
and
for 15
so
years
I've got
evolution?
a lot of explaining to do there. I agree. But I think I can turn the problem on you. There are also problems. I think all of us have holes.
We all have holes, absolutely. I'm trying to press you on the. I'm going to make a strong challenge. I'm going to say that the notion of intelligent design is incoherent.
Well,
because it's either a natural cause, in which case you don't go anywhere, or it's divine cause, in which case you don't have the biblical God.
But then,
so
I'm not arguing for, as a design theorist scientifically, I'm not arguing for the biblical God. I'm arguing for design as such, not moral design.
And I'm saying
design.
I'm saying the concept is incoherent as such, incoherent, unintelligible. It can't be natural. It can't be divine. It's vacuous.
I mean, there are traditions within philosophy, Stoic philosophy, where you have a world soul and immanent teleology working.
Yeah, but you're a Christian.
All right, gentlemen.
Next question. Don't the very existence of logic and reason say something about the nature of the universe?
Now, listen to C.S. Lewis. Granted that reason is prior to matter, as it is in the traditional Judeo-Christian conception of the world,
that's not true.
I can understand, certainly it's true.
No.
I can understand how men should come, but that's a separate show.
That's creation.
By observation and inference.
They're created together.
I can understand how men should come by, then let's rewrite Lewis to say this way.
Okay.
Granted that reason is separate from, that it stands apart from matter. It is not an artifact arising from matter. I can understand how men should come by observation and inference to know a lot about the universe they live in. If, on the other hand, minds are wholly dependent on brains, sheer physical artifact, and brains on biochemistry, and biochemistry in the long run on the meaningless flux of the atoms, I cannot understand how the thought of those minds should have any more significance than the sound of the wind in the trees. That is to say, if there's nothing in the world but matter, shaped as Darwin would have us believe by the meaningless flux of the atoms, how can reason itself exist?
I find that the capacity for reason is part of a continuum. In my humanist tradition, we do not see reason as something that has been sort of divinely bestowed. Reason is something that evolved like other human capacities, such as love and affection and fear and hatred and so forth and so on. It's a central nervous system product.
What you're saying, reasoning, the ability to reason,
correct.
Evolved, but you have to grant that there are certain objective standards of logic, and the ability to intuit those or to operate on them may be what has evolved. But you have to grant that there's a something pretty impressive that says that 2 + 2 = 4, always and everywhere, that exists outside the world of matter.
Why?
It's not an artifact of matter.
It's a Platonic view.
It's not just reasoning. It's just even our knowledge of the world, whether we have any sort of grasp on reality, because if that's called into question if the Darwinian view is true, because Darwinism, if that holds, what is selected for is survival and reproduction, not knowing the truth. So if you can build up an illusion in your mind which will allow you to survive and reproduce, so much the better. Now, when I use that argument, though, with stricter Darwinists, I find that it seems to have very little traction. Willard Quine, who's recently passed away, a philosopher, would say that if natural selection doesn't select for truth, then we'll probably get wiped out. Okay, we're not going to be able to survive and reproduce. So there are counter arguments that are made. I find that for me, it's persuasive. I think it is a problem. I think you feel the force of it, but it seems that when you work within a worldview, a Darwinian worldview, I think you jerry-rig things and you make it all come out.
Well, I think that's an unfair statement. Ever since the 60s, philosophy of science has debunked these kind of arguments. This is a reductionist argument, right? It's saying you're going to reduce mental capacities to neurophysical capacities to physics. And there are massive arguments, which we all, I think, would agree with, actually.
Right.
I think we'd all agree with the anti-reductionist arguments that are out there that would say, of course, you have genuine epistemic claims at the level of psychology and rationality, which can't be reduced to the claims of physics.
They're emergent.
Right, they're emergent. These are emergent properties and processes which emerge with more complexity.
But that still doesn't get you at whether what emerges has any hold on reality.
That is to say,
it can be one big delusion that helps you survive.
You're right, but as a Christian, since I believe God, through the Logos, creates the world with rationality, and in particular evolves it through
But the strict Darwinist who's not a Christian doesn't have that.
I agree with you.
What I'm trying to do is pose a problem for you, really, rather than for Bob.
To me, this is not a problem because we are living in a universe in which these qualities qualities exist. Maybe
So-
in another universe these
you
qualities
grant,
wouldn't,
hold
but
on
that's
now.
not what
Hang
we only have
on.
one
Hang
universe
on.
to experiment
So,
with.
but you grant then that the universe contains things that are outside matter, but nevertheless have reality. That is to say, the laws of nature, the laws of logic, reason itself in some sense.
Phenomena like you're describing, like
So
reasoning.
Darwin, however, if those natural laws exist, I'm trying one more try and then I'll drop it. If I can't interest you this time, I'll let it go. The primordial soup starts bubbling and evolution starts taking place within a world in which things already exist. There's already a reality that includes natural law, logic, and so forth, right? There's a framework within which evolution occurs. So the question is, where did that stuff come from?
We know that we live in a world of matter, energy, and their interaction, the material world. We know that.
Right.
There are many things that we don't know.
And
I
also,
told you, hold on.
the laws of nature don't exist. They're reflections of the regularity of nature. The laws I write down don't have prescriptive power. They're describing the efficacy of nature itself, which is God's gift to nature.
So
It's
logic
the way
is a mere phenomenon of matter.
No. Well, it's a way of quickly
It simply
describing.
happens to be, okay, well, that's interesting.
Because I'm not a Platonist.
Let me try to bring this debate to a close with some summary questions.
Stephen Jay Gould has suggested that science and religion can coexist beautifully if they are each is viewed as a separate magisterium or domain of authority. That's something about, like what you were saying, if we just wear appropriate hats at the appropriate moment. Scientists can know certain things as scientists. Religious people can believe certain things
But
as...
his is a stronger position.
His is a stronger position.
kind of baby
Gould himself notes that Pope Pius XII ruled physical evolution, 1950, compatible with Orthodox faith, and that in 1996, John Paul II did not say God created through evolution, but he said that physical evidence had rendered evolution, quote, more than a hypothesis. Now, let me give you another statement by the Pope and see if you can all buy this as a coherent and logically acceptable statement, all right? Man is the only creature on earth that God has wanted for its own sake. If the human body takes its origin from pre-existent living matter, then the spiritual soul is immediately created by God. There is an aspect of humanity, of each human being, which is directly created by God. Theories of evolution, which consider the mind as emerging from forces of living matter or as a mere epiphenomenon of this matter, are incompatible with the truth about man. Can you accept that statement?
I don't think the theory of evolution is incompatible with the notion of human dignity or us being special in God's mind, because I don't ontologize the soul into being something created. I think
You don't?
No, I take it to be the total person, which is George Coyne's rendition of Pope John Paul II's version anyway.
And Genie?
If human beings are special to God, he waited a long time before human beings showed up. He waited several billion years.
True enough, but
I mean, I
I waited a long time before getting married and having children, but I assure you my children are the most important thing in my life.
Absolutely. I
think
mean, this
all
is a
creation is
theological
important
argument
to
that I let religious people argue about.
All of nature
You
is
don't,
created
so you
special to God.
disagree that man has special standing in God's view?
No, I think we're created imago Dei.
Bill, what do you make of the Pope?
I'm largely with it. I mean, with the statement, I think he's describing the classic dualist position that I think's been associated with the Christian position. That's coming under fire not only certainly from the Darwinist camp, but also from a lot of contemporary theological moves. But
Do you contend that it's easier to take what the Pope said if you believe in intelligent design than if you believe in evolution?
Well, I think it is, at least in the way I'm trying to develop intelligent design, because I see it as the way I develop it scientifically is as a theory of information, and there information achieves a status comparable to energy, matter, space, and time. So it is something that's not reducible to just some sort of emergent property of matter and energy. And in that sense, there is a natural dualism. I mean, it's sort of the hardware-software distinction. You've got the information, how the matter is arranged versus the matter itself.
Peter, what's important is that a whole wealth of New Testament scholars and biblical theologians and systematic theologians reject dualism and say the original teaching in Paul is a psychosomatic unity, soma psychikon, is a psychosomatic unity of the person. We're not a Greek soul and a body that's eternal. We're a human being, created and dies.
Yeah. Which
You
is
don't believe in life after death?
Of course I do, because of Jesus Christ. I believe in resurrection.
Yeah.
Absolutely, but not an immortal soul per se.
Yeah,
I'm not saying you can as a Christian. I'm just saying that isn't the essential message of the Christian tradition.
The way theology is going, I mean, it's as Bob is describing it, but I would say it's not consistent with where the tradition has been generally.
I plead the exigencies not of evolution, but we lack geologic time here. It's television. This is the last question. You will be immensely relieved to hear me quote someone other than the Pope. In fact, two scientists for you, Genie. All right? Richard Dawkins. Somebody's already quoted him. Richard Dawkins, quote, "Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist," close quote. Albert Einstein, quote, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." Will the practice of science in the 21st century lead us toward or away from a religious understanding of life? Robert?
Towards.
Bill?
Toward.
I think religion is as human as bipedalism. I don't think science is going to replace
Isn't that a
it.
compliment to you as a theologian? You're right up there with the podiatrist.
No, I think that is not a deprecatory statement.
I agree with you.
I mean, it's part of humanity. We are two-legged creatures. It has been part of our evolution. It's very adaptive, et cetera, et cetera. We are a species to which religion is very important. All human groups that have ever been studied have had a concept of something other than the material world, and the various ways these ideas play themselves out are often, you know, what composes
Peter,
religion.
I'll add to
and
your
it's very
Or is
basic.
it
It's
reality?
very-
I mean,
But
science gets us at reality. I mean, at least that's the popular conception.
That's not true. Religion can
I
also...
tell you
It
now, what
shouldn't
you were
be
about to
true.
say, Bob, is the last word on this show.
Okay,
Go
religion
ahead.
can also lead us to a better understanding of science.
Oh, that can't be the last word. Give me another sentence or two on how you mean that.
Well, Einstein was inspired, as was Hoyle, to construct theories around views they had about the universe. And in both cases, they had testable views, Big Bang cosmology and Hoyle's steady-state cosmology. It shows that you can have your own personal views influence the way you do science. As long as what you
Your
do...
own personal religious views.
Yes, as long as once you have them in the context of discovery, you give them to the community fairly for them to test it in the context of justification.
Genie, Bob, and Bill, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm Peter Robinson for Uncommon Knowledge. Thank you for joining us.